Today, we're making ginger mead. Hi, I'm Brian.
I'm Derica, and you're watching City Studying Brews. As Brian said, we're making ginger mead today. Now, this is an incredibly simple but incredibly delicious recipe, so we're going to go slightly into more detail. So this is a great video for those of you who are new to mead brewing.
We're going to educate you. Yeah, what we figured is we've done a lot of mead videos and a lot of different brewing videos, and we cover various aspects in different videos. This time, we're going to take it a little step by step. I don't want this to be like another 45-minute behemoth of a video, but it's probably going to be a little bit longer than some of our others. But stay tuned because there's good stuff in here. What we want to go over is some of the techniques and things like that you need to know if you want to make mead for yourself. Little things, lots of questions that we've been asked over the last couple of years. And we just want to kind of clear the air on a few things so that people actually understand. So this is ginger mead, which means it's made with honey, okay? You cannot make mead without honey. So if someone says, oh, can I do this with maple syrup? You can totally make something like this with maple syrup. It just won't be mead, okay? And that's the clarification there. If I used sugar instead of honey, now it's wine, so it would be ginger wine. All perfectly good, just not mead. That is the clarification. Mead requires half of the fermentable sugars to be honey. And that's really what makes alcohols. The fermentable sugars mixed with the yeast consumes it and turns it into carbon dioxide and alcohol, as well as a lot of other little things, most of what we don't actually want, but it does it anyway. So that's how alcohol is made. Very, very simple. We'll get into some more of the details on that in a little bit. For now, I want to talk about ginger for just a minute. First, it's a root, which means it grows underground, which means it's filthy. Clean it. I scrubbed it with a brush. Now half the skin pretty much comes off when you do that, and I'm going to show you an easy way to get more of the skin off of this and kind of give you an idea of how we're going to chop it up. Okay, so ginger, see, it has this peel on it. Now, you can use a vegetable peeler if you really want to, but I found that just using a spoon and going over it lightly like this actually works a lot better. You can get into all these little nooks and crannies here pretty simply, and it just seems to peel it like super quick and easy. Somebody else showed me this, and I just started doing it like seriously very recently, and there's almost no waste with this method. Whereas using a vegetable peeler, I found I was peeling off half the ginger, so I ended up with a lot less. So, use that little trick. And while I'm peeling this, I'll talk to you about a couple other things. The question always comes up, how much ginger should I use? That's a good question. How much fruit should I use? How much of this? How much of that? And they're all really good questions, and a lot of it comes down to trial and error and personal preference, okay? I can't tell you how sweet you're going to like something, therefore I can't tell you how strong you're going to like, say, a jalapeno mead. I can't tell you. Some people have told me that four habaneros in their capsicum still wasn't hot enough. Others said that half a jalapeno was too much. So it is to taste. That's the beauty of brewing for yourself, is you get to decide how everything is done. While Derica finishes up working on the ginger, I'm going to go over a couple other things about yeast. Today I'm going to be using Lalvin 71B yeast. This is a 14% alcohol tolerance yeast. Really nice for fruity wines and things like that. I intend to add a little bit of lemon or citrus of some kind to this in secondary, which secondary is not right now. Right now we're making the primary fermentation. After this is done, we'll rack it to another vessel, getting it off all the lees and things like that, and all the solids. That's secondary fermentation. It's kind of a misnomer. It's not really fermenting so much as clearing out and finishing up. That's when we'll add a little bit of extra citrus. Now, why wouldn't I put citrus in now? Well, here's the thing. Ginger is kind of a natural antimicrobial, antibacterial thing. Somebody's going to correct me and tell me exactly what it is. But let's just say it doesn't play well with yeast all the time. It does have some properties that will kill yeast or retard their growth, if you will. So, because of that, I don't want to add lemon juice too, which is acidic and also can hurt the yeast. So I figure we'll just get it one negative at a time, get the second negative in later when it won't actually matter, and we can just adjust for flavoring. Because, you know, a little bit of lemon added to ginger, just really nice. So anyway, when it comes to doing yeast, I have a rule, and my rule is if you're making up to under 3 gallons, you use half a packet. If you're doing more than 3 gallons, up to say 6 gallons, whole packet. If you're making more than 6 gallons, you probably aren't watching our videos because you're already doing this for a living. And if you are watching our videos, that's pretty cool. Anyway, so I'm going to open this up. And what I have is my famous self-stirring cup, which is actually the
Magic Bullet.
Magic Bullet, yeah. I always forget the name of it. It's the replacement cup to a Magic Bullet. It has ribs on the inside so that when you do this, it stirs automatically so I don't have to put anything else in there. I'm just going to roughly measure out half a packet. People are always asking, if I make 2 gallons, do I need to use more yeast? Well, no. Could you? Sure, if you really want to. The thing is, it's very hard to overpitch yeast, but you can underpitch fairly easily. And what I mean by that is this. When the yeast gets applied to the must, okay, what'll happen first is the colony has to build up. It has to multiply and reproduce. The more you put in, the quicker it'll get to that stage. Potentially, but not necessarily. We're talking it's going to multiply a lot. So putting in twice the yeast doesn't really make it happen twice as fast because it might have to go to 50 times the amount that you put in there. So double, triple even, doesn't really make much difference. The only way you can really overpitch is if you couldn't stir it anymore. Like you literally put in about 500 packets of yeast and you just can't stir. Then I would say you overpitched. It's just wasteful is all it comes down to, okay? But underpitching, see, that's a problem. Because if you don't put in enough, let me just be honest, before I get to putting in enough. Inside this packet, there's probably millions of yeast cells, okay? Out of those millions, probably 75% of them are actually dead. Now, they serve a purpose. They act as a nutrient for the yeast that's already in here, thereby allowing them to grow. They're basically cannibals. I mean, they'll eat their own and not care. So when I rehydrate them in water, most of that is dead, okay? The ones that are alive are cannibalizing the ones that are dead, thereby making a new colony. But if you go too small a quantity, you might not have enough viable yeast to create that colony. That's why I say half a packet for a gallon or 2 gallons and a full packet for 3 gallons or more.
In other words, brewing with yeast is a biological process, not so much a chemical process. But you do need to take the chemicals into consideration because the right chemicals can contribute to the biological process, where the wrong chemicals can hinder or completely stop the biological process.
Which brings me to the number one rule of working with yeast, and that is this. The yeast in this cup have no idea what is written on this package. They have no idea what their alcohol tolerance is, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. So every packet might be just slightly different. Every batch is a little bit different. Every environment that you use them in will have a factor in how they work. To say, this will finish out in 6 days, well, it might have once. Next time might be 7. Next time might be 12. Even using the same yeast in similar conditions, it doesn't matter. Different ginger, all these things change it. Don't rely so much on, well, he said it'll be done in 2 weeks. Use your measurements. We'll get into that in a little bit. It's really important to treat this as a science experiment rather than a science fact because, well, there's some facts to it, but for the most part, there's a lot of variables, okay? And that's part of what makes this fun. I can make this same batch 5 times and it'll be slightly different each time. And I'm going to be honest with you, most winemakers and brewers, even on a large scale, theirs come out different too. But you know what they do? They blend a little bit of last year's batch with a little bit of this year's batch so that they can get a consistent profile in their bottling every time. Well, you can do that at home too if you want to. I tend to drink it all before I have a chance to do that. So we don't do that, but you totally could, and there's nothing wrong with that. So this is where some people say, oh, it's so inconsistent. Well, it is, and it always is. But when you have thousands and thousands of gallons that you're making at a time, and you do that 3 to 4 times a year and have that turnover, you can mix those and create a more consistent profile across your product for years to come. As a home brewer, we don't normally have quantities like that to be able to work with. How's it going?
Good, I'm almost done.
Yeah, this part kind of sucks, I'll be honest. But you see how much ginger we have here. I'm gonna weigh it in a minute just so that we know how much it is. but I'm going to say it's probably something like 4 or 5 ounces, which is, oh, I don't know, like 200 to 300 grams. Not a tremendous amount, but a pretty decent amount. When we made our ginger beer, we actually used about 2 ounces for a gallon of ginger beer. Now, I've also been told that the longer this mead ages, the more the ginger flavor works its way out. Oh, by the way, something you might not have known. We've never made this one before. We're doing it for the first time just for you guys. But you know how I found out how to do it? I did some research. I talked to people that have made a ginger mead before. I looked around on the internet. I watched YouTube videos. And I saw some things that I liked and some things that I really didn't like. I tried really hard to not comment on some of the things I didn't like and failed. And came up with my own way of doing it. Now, if you've never made mead before, please don't do what I did. Don't just come up with your own way. Do what we did or do what someone else did that you trust, that you know their recipe works. Once you understand the fundamentals, then you can say, I like that, I don't like that, and incorporate these things into your very own recipe and your own brew, which is exactly how I do things.
A quick note about the type of ginger we're using. We're using just ginger that we bought at the grocery store because my ginger crop's not ready to harvest. But this is just the root ginger, the rhizome of the ginger plant. There are other types of ginger, such as stem ginger or crystallized ginger, and our friend Paul, hi Paul, used all 3 types of ginger in his ginger mead, and he really enjoyed it. But he used a lot more of a quantity of ginger in his ginger mead, and he said it came out very spicy. That spicy note that is inherent in ginger really came out, and he appreciated that. I like the spicy note of ginger. Brian, not so much. So that's why we decided to keep it down to just this one type of ginger because it was easy for us to get. And this amount, we're hoping, gives that nice ginger kick, but isn't too overwhelmingly spicy.
Another thing that might come up is you might ask, well, how come I didn't use the stem ginger and crystallized ginger? Well, because we thought this is an opportunity to make a very simple video showing you a very simple mead that tastes amazing and focus on technique rather than the recipe itself. Okay? So you can use more ginger than this, you can use less ginger than this. It's still going to work. It's still going to be great. But know what's going to happen. If you use more, you might retard the growth of the colony and you're going to make a much spicier mead. Use less, you won't retard it as much, but you're going to have a lot less of that ginger flavor. So everything has a plus and minus. Everything comes with consequences or bonuses, depending on how you want to do it. And that's the secret to homebrew too, is understanding those things and being able to balance them into something that works for you or for those that you're going to give it to. So while I chop up the ginger, we're going to talk about yeast just a little bit more and how to treat it. Because you might be wondering, okay, well, I threw it in some water, but what's that all about? That's called hydrating your yeast. And the reason we do that is because, I mean, you could just sprinkle it right in the jar and that's fine. But I like to know if my yeast is active. I like to know if it's alive. So I'm watching for a little bit of foam, a little bit of activity in there. Even if it doesn't, that doesn't mean it's dead. But it just gives you an idea of whether you need to worry. By the way, I'm cutting the ginger up into little cubes, 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, just big enough that I can pick them out later without them causing like too much mush at the bottom, but small enough that I can get a lot of their goodness out. And some people will grate this, and you can totally do that too. I didn't want that much of a mess. And somebody's going to say, well, you can just put it in a bag. Yes, you totally can. However, that bag takes up space. I'm using a 1 gallon wide mouth fermenter that is actually technically a little bit smaller than a gallon. Somehow they are, I don't know. And I don't like to use up more space than I need to in there, and it's just so simple to take the auto siphon and stick it in later. It's not a big deal to me. So, yes, you can totally use the bag. I just don't. But anyway, some more words about the yeast.
We want to keep this guy this size?
Yeah, we'll keep him that size.
Okay.
We hydrate the yeast so it, A, we know it's living, like I said, and B, we don't shock the system. Because now it's in liquid, we're going to put it into a must. If I just drop it right into a must, it could, in theory, shock that enough that the yeast will go into a dormant state and not work at all. And, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of fermenting, doesn't it? Oh, there are different yeasts you can use. Lots and lots of different yeasts you can use. People always ask, oh, can you make a list of all the yeasts and what they do? Yeah, There's hundreds, okay? And they all do different things. But one thing that's very important to note is it is all, let me make sure I get this right, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Yeah, that's yeast as we know it. It's for brewing, okay? And that includes bread yeast, and that includes wine yeast, and that includes so-called mead yeast, which isn't really a thing. And that also includes beer, wine, mead, cider, you name it. All those yeasts are the same thing, okay? And basically, it's marketing when they say different things. Like if they sweet mead yeast, well, guess what? You can make dry mead with that just as easily as sweet mead. And if they say it's a dry wine yeast, well, you can easily make a sweet wine with it too. It's all about tolerances and how much sugars you put in. We'll get into that in a little bit. I just wanted to kind of touch on it and say the yeast you choose has a huge impact on your brew, okay? But if you choose a yeast that's roughly the same kind of tolerance, the differences aren't going to be as great as people might lead you to believe, okay? I'd also like to talk about bread yeast. I'm not using it today. Why? Because I don't have a lot left and I have to make bread. So I didn't use it today. But I have many times. And if someone ever tells you, oh, you can't use bread yeast for brewing, they're lying to you. They're wrong, okay? And I don't know where it comes from so much other than some of the more elitist types of attitudes about brewing. But bread yeast makes a perfectly fine product. As a matter of fact, my grape wine, I have made it with other yeasts and it's not as good. Bread yeast makes it better. And what I have found is bread yeast actually gives a great flavor to things. I don't really know why. I don't know what the scientific differences are here. It gives a great flavor, but it doesn't finish out as clean. So it doesn't make as pretty of a final product, but it certainly tastes good. Some people have said that they get a yeasty flavor when they use bread yeast in the final product. And I think part of that is there are different kinds of bread yeasts and not all act the same. I have found that Red Star is not nearly as consistent for brewing as
Fleischmann's.
Fleischmann's. I like Fleischmann's bread yeast. It works wonderfully well for making bread as well as for brewing. It just seems to work really well. I routinely get anywhere from 11 to 13% on it, which is roughly the same as Lalvin 71B or some of the others that we use. D47 is another popular one. Roughly the same alcohol content. The difference is the Lalvin 71B we found actually works really, really quickly and gives a nice, it makes fruity esters. Now esters are technically off flavors, okay? They're byproducts of the fermentation process, not really the main flavor you're going for, because you can get like a banana ester in something that has no banana. It's merely an off flavor, and it's your brain saying, this is what this tastes like or smells like to me. It's not really banana in there, but that's an ester. That's a fake flavor, if you will, okay? But they're preferable sometimes. A lot of people like that in beers and things like that. So various yeasts will do that. To go into all the details on that would take like 15 videos, and even then I don't think I'd even touch the subject. As you can see, this is a lot of ginger. I left the pieces fairly large though, so this might sit in here for a while because I want to get all that goodness out. Now, this is another one of those times that there's a lot of different ways to do this, okay? Some people would make a tea out of this, and they boil that down and make a tea, and then they add that and they ferment with that. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a perfectly genuine way to do it. My issue with that is you are now limited to how much flavor you're going to get out of that ginger. Once you take that off the burner and strain it, that's it. That's all the ginger you're ever going to have. It could be argued that you got most of it out, but maybe not. Also, in here, if you look at ginger, it's kind of got little like strings and stuff in there. All that works as a nutrient for that yeast. It gives it something to feed on. So I wanted the yeast to have the best chance they could have in here. And before somebody says, wanted to have the best chance but didn't use yeast nutrient, I don't believe in that stuff. It actually doesn't improve things. It makes things go faster. Also, if you try doing things that are unnatural, like, oh, let me put 27 pounds of honey into a 1 gallon, add yeast nutrient, sure, it'll work, maybe. But I'm about flavor, and keeping things simple. And I don't want to have to give a corporation any more money than I have to. So I don't really want their invented chemical stuff in my mead. I'm not making Franken mead. I'm making ginger mead. Just kind of came out.
Also, a quick note about nutrient. If you are using a nutrient and you want to be as natural as possible, there are organic nutrients.
Yeah.
But those, in general, contain dead yeast, which we've already covered, is already in our yeast packet anyway, and some sort of nitrogen feed, which...
Usually DAP, diammonium phosphate.
Which is not necessarily good because there are studies showing that it could cause cancer.
Yeah.
But nitrogen is also in organic materials such as ginger, and that's why we're putting the whole ginger in there, because there we go. We got the dead
It's
yeast,
also
we got the
in
nitrogen.
leaves, stems, twigs, stuff like that. I
Yep.
mean, you can go out in the backyard and just grab some fresh little twigs off of a tree, throw them in your mead too, and they do the same thing as nutrient.
If you're
So-
doing a mellow mel that includes fruit, fruit is a wonderful feeder for yeast, and so I don't see why there would be any reason why you'd need to add any additives to a mellow mel, because the yeasts are going to be perfectly happy feeding on those fruits.
Now, another argument that's going to come up is, well, back in the day, people didn't know about all this stuff, so they didn't do it. And yes, you're right. And sure, today we can do things a lot easier. Our whole purpose, though, is to show you how simple things can be, not overly complicated, not add a lot of additives, keep it very pure and very simple. We're still using much better methods than were used 100, 200, 500, 10,000 years ago, but we're doing it in a way that's as close to nature as possible. We don't want to complicate it. I mean, you just saw, I chopped up ginger. Really, that's it. That's how hard this is.
So that is a great segue to our next topic for brewing prep, and that's sanitization.
And clean up. This is going in the sink.
Yeah. So this is the infamous turbos, or the red bucket of sanitization!
We decided it was time for him to make an appearance. He used to be on every single episode back when we set things up a little bit differently. But now, basically, it's a plastic bucket, okay? It's half filled with water, and we used star sand in it. Now, star sand, use it by the directions, just uses a little bit each time. People say it's very expensive. It may be in certain countries to get it very expensive to have it shipped, but in reality, it's still super cheap. Even at double or triple the price that we pay for it, it's still really, really cheap, because a bottle like this lasts us like a year and a half. I mean, this is the 32-ounce one, I think. This lasts a long time. You can also reuse this stuff if you don't completely muddy it up. Some questions on that have come up. We do not save this stuff, the star sand liquid. We dump it. And we dump it down the sink. It won't hurt your drains and your pipes in its diluted form. You dump that directly in, yeah, it'll ruin your sink and ruin your pipes. I also don't recommend mixing this in your sink. When you do dump this down your sink, run a little water to help rinse it out. It'll be fine. But if you leave it in your sink for any length of time, you could corrode things, because it is an acid, okay? It is an acid based. I have heard of people who said, I had my hands in it and my ring was causing a problem. You are not following the directions, because this stuff should not harm you in any way. You can drink this. So if it's burning your hand, you did it wrong. And I'm really sorry if anybody is offended by that, but it should have no reaction to gold, silver, stainless steel, anything like that. No reaction whatsoever. So it will not affect rings. It will not affect your jewelry. I mean, I don't recommend soaking them in it, but it shouldn't be a problem. You will, if it burns your skin, recheck your methods. You're overusing, okay?
And if you do recheck your methods, then you may have a sensitivity to it and therefore take precaution.
That is a possibility as well. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how people could have a sensitivity to it, or if they do, or if it's possible, or whatever. So maybe you do. Sorry if you do. I didn't mean any offense. Anyway, the way to use this stuff, we just put things in, give it a little swirl, leave them in there for a few minutes. You don't want to leave them in for hours on end. It will dissolve plastic slightly and make like a slimy feel to it. So as a matter of fact, we're going to take things out now because they've been in there for a little while. Some tools that you'll likely need to use along the way. Turkey baster for getting samples out. Works wonderfully. a syringe, which this is a new one to our repertoire here, and only works with certain containers, so I don't use it all the time.
It's basically a replacement for the turkey baster.
Yes, it works the same way as the turkey baster. It's just supposed to be quicker and easier. We'll see soon. This is a lid with a grommet to hold an airlock. We also have, I'll take this out now. The airlock itself, and the way airlocks work, okay? They go into the grommet, which goes onto the jar, and CO2 comes out, pushes up, pushes this liquid down, pushes that liquid up, and bubbles out. You've probably seen the bubbling thing happening. And that means bad out, bad out, but nothing back in, okay? So you're not going to get any fruit flies, you're not going to get gnats, you're not going to get, any kind of bugs coming back in. You're also not going to get any bacteria, airborne stuff, hairs, things like that. They won't make it through the water, they'll be captured. That's the idea. It works kind of like the trap in a sink, okay?
So we fill ours with sanitization liquid, but you can also use a alcoholic beverage.
If you bought like a crappy bottle of scotch and you just absolutely can't stand it, use that. It's okay. Anything, don't just use regular water, okay? And don't use like bleach and things like that. Anything that you don't mind a little bit of it being in your brew is what you should use. Like, alcohols, things like that are perfect because a little alcohol into your brew. Oh no, let me have more alcohol in it, And sanitizer water. Like I said, you can drink this stuff, quarter ounce in your brew.
As long as it's properly diluted. You don't want to use the
right.
full
Don't do that.
strength stuff.
That's why I say sanitization liquid, not Star San itself, because this is sanitization liquid. That was Star San. You drink that, call the hospital. It's just not good for you. Then we also have a hydrometer and the graduated cylinder. Now, it doesn't have to have measurements on it. That's okay. Your hydrometer does, though. That's the important thing. We did a video on how to read a hydrometer, so I'm not going to do the whole thing on that, but we will touch on little pieces and points here and there. So that's the basic equipment that you need to make a brew. In addition to a fermenting vessel, okay? Today I am using an open mouth 1 gallon vessel. Now, I know from experience this vessel is not exactly 1 gallon. It's a little smaller than 1 gallon. And this is where people will say, why don't you use a bag? Well, why should I? I could put a bag in here, but that bag's going to take up more space. Like I said, I'm already pressed for space. I don't want to do that. By the way, while we're here, might as well just add our ginger because, it's got to get in here somehow anyway. Some other things that you're going to need are water. We're using our filtered water from the sink. It's actually tap water that's been filtered. Some people have said that they have much better results with different spring waters, things like that. I've tested our water against those. The flavor is like the same. So that's a judgment call. If your tap water tastes like crap and you wouldn't drink it, don't brew with it. Garbage in, garbage out, okay? You want to use the best ingredients you can. This is not something that you're going to make and use up in a day. You're probably going to have this stuff hanging around for several months. Put a little bit of effort in, you'll get a better result. You'll like it better, and you'll want to do it again.
Our filtration system takes the chlorine out of our water, which is key. You don't use chlorinated water. That's bad for brewing.
Okay, honey is the other main ingredient in mead, obviously. Now this happens to be Sweet Squeeze Florida honey. You can get it, we have a link below to it. This is a local honey for us, even though we actually buy it from Amazon. So it's not expensive based on what it is. I think it's like $4 a pound, which is really reasonable for a good quality honey. But you can use any real honey. But be careful, because some of the stores will say, oh, this is real honey, and it might not actually be honey. It could just be, sugar water and things like that.
This honey is raw and unfiltered, and we prefer using raw and unfiltered honey. If we had the space in our backyard, we would, and the knowledge, because there's also knowledge included in this,
and time.
We would have our own apiary and harvest straight from.
Another note about honey, and many mead videos will have you do this thing where they take a pot and they put it on the stove and they pour water in and they bring it to a boil and then they add honey. Okay, if you're going to do that, there is absolutely no point in finding good honey. Use whatever crap you can get off the store because it's not going to be any different. By boiling honey, you are killing it. You are destroying subtleties of flavor, depths of flavors, extra little things that they're gone once you start cooking it. We did make a bochet. I'm going to do it again and do it better.
That is completely different.
But that's a whole different thing. When you boil that honey in water, you're just killing off lots of nuance that makes mead special. I highly suggest not doing that. Now, I took this and I put it in turbos in, what was it, maybe 110 degree water? I mean, it's not hot. It's enough to thin this up a little bit because, we all know honey pours nice and slow.
And that's the only reason why he did that is to warm it up so that it pours easy.
Yeah, just a little higher than room temperature, probably like, blood temperature. Another thing that's very useful to have is a scale. Now, this scale is special. This is my third or fourth one in brewing because they all sucked up till now. This one measures in grams and ounces and pounds. That's important. And it takes up to 50 pounds, which means I can put a 3-gallon fermenter on here and add the ingredients to it and not go past that 50-pound mark and be able to measure everything down to a gram. That's just awesome. This scale also for sale in the links below. I know I'm saying that a lot, but you know what? There's certain items that I really don't want you to skimp. I don't want you to just go, oh, well, here's a scale. No, get one that you know works. Get one that we say works, that I use in every single video.
Yeah, the stuff that we have linked is stuff that we actually use, and we've gone through and we've tried multiple things. We've gone through trial and error. We've gone through all the research for you.
Learn from our mistakes.
Yes, so this is the one that we found that works the best, and so that's why we're sharing that with you.
Now, another funny thing about brewing is there's this lovely combination of the metric and U.S. imperial system for everything, okay? When I say a gallon, I mean a U.S. gallon. British gallons are larger, and I usually measure honey in pounds, but I can give you a metric equivalent as well. Just remember, I'm not really being biased. It's just most of our stuff is measured to U.S. imperial system, so to make the conversion on the fly doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and some of the stuff is just, you'll see in a minute. So we have our ginger, okay? I'm going to put that right on the scale. And then I'm going to tear it out, clear it out. So that way it's zeroed, okay? And I'm going to change that back to pounds and ounces. Now, I'm going to add 3 pounds of honey to this. Let me talk about that for a minute. When I say a pound of honey, I don't mean a pound of honey and a gallon of water. It's a pound of honey dissolved in a gallon, okay? That's important to understand. And keep in mind, this is slightly smaller than a gallon, and I need to leave some headroom too, which I'll get into in a minute. So I'm using a lot less than a gallon, really. It's more like 7/8 of a gallon, probably. So this rule that I'm about to tell you, take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. For every pound of honey in a gallon of must, it's about 35 points of gravity. What's gravity? Get into that in a minute. Also, you should watch this video here on how to do that stuff. Yeah, it'll explain that and make a lot more sense. But that means 0.035 of gravity for every pound of honey. So in theory, by putting 3 pounds into this, I have a 1.050 starting gravity. But it's probably going to be a little higher than that because I don't have a full gallon here. That's important to know because I don't want to overload it, but I don't want to underload it either. I want this to end up coming out sweet. But I'm planning to back sweeten it to taste because I don't know how strong that ginger is going to be yet. So I'm trying to just hit the tolerance of the yeast, stop there, and then I can back sweeten as I wish. Okay? If you're not following all that, I'm really sorry. We do have other videos that show some of the stuff. We have a newbie playlist, actually. That's wonderful for that. But I'm going to try to explain as much as I can without making this, a 14-hour video. So let me start pouring this honey. And like I said, I'm going for 3 pounds. So this might be shortened because honey pours slow. All right, so we have our 3 pounds of honey and we have our ginger already in the bottle. Now, at this point, it doesn't look like much, and it's not really. So I'm just going to get some stuff out of the way here. What I want to do is be able to mix this up and thin it out so it will mix better. So I'm just going to add some water. Notice I said some water. No real measurement here. I'm just going to probably get that to about there-ish or so, because I just want to be able to mix this through. Now comes the conundrum. I like the smaller lid carboys because I can just put my thumb over the end and I can shake those up. This, not so simple to shake up, so let me go get something. The stirring paddle of ridiculous size. This is made for doing like 5-gallon batches and in buckets and stuff like that. It works just as well for smaller batches. I'm tempted to get one and just cut it so that I have a small end. But it's a paddle, so it actually makes stirring much easier. As you're doing this, you want to be kind of rough with it without spilling it all over the place, of course, which I usually do. Because you want to get some oxygen in there, okay? In the first stages of building a colony, the yeast actually wants oxygen, all right? So it's important. And you can see that because that honey was nice and warm, it already mixed through really nicely. So now I'm just going to add a little bit more water. So let me say, we talked about buying good honey. We talked about good water. Talked about yeast. Talked a little bit about technique and things like that. And you see how I'm breaking that up, getting some air into it. You can stir this for hours if you really want to. I don't go that crazy. What I have started doing though is after this is made and sitting under the desk of fermentation, I'll give it a swirl a couple times a day just to introduce that air back in and degas it slightly. I'll get into that soon. So at this point, it is a must, all right? And it could be argued that if I just put an airlock on this and let it sit, this would actually ferment because there's natural yeast in that honey because we didn't boil it, and there's natural yeast in that ginger because we didn't boil it. But they're unpredictable. We tried that.
Our luck with wild fermentations have been suspect at best.
And we're doing this on video. I want to show you a successful product, not oh, well, hey, this came out to 4%. Because that's what happened last time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pitch the yeast. So I'm just going to give this another stir up. It didn't get all foamy, but I know this is brand new yeast. We just made something with it like 2 weeks ago, so it should be fine. Oh, keep your yeast in the fridge, not in the freezer. That could kill it. Keep it in the fridge before they're open and once they're open. See, I just fold that over, put it in the fridge. They last for months on around here. So I'm just going to dump this right in. This is called pitching the yeast. Don't ask me why they call it that. I call it putting the yeast in.
Now, we have not taken a gravity reading yet.
Nope.
And if you use a kit or even read some of the documentation with the yeast, they will tell you to take the gravity reading first. We do not because, as you see, Brian is adding more water as he's doing this.
That changes your reading.
So that's going to change the reading because now the dilution of the sugars to the liquid has changed. But we're going to take the reading right away. So that way the yeast won't have time to do anything to change the reading. So that's what we do.
That's the theory. People don't want you to pitch the yeast and then take a reading because for some reason people do that and wait like a week to take a reading. I don't know. I'm doing it right now. I'm going to take a reading now. I can't see waiting a week. That's just dumb because then there would be alcohol in there and it would change the reading and it wouldn't be accurate. Blah, 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 blah. Also, another thing about accuracy of home brewing. You're reading lines that are this big from inches away and things like that. How accurate is any of that? If you're within a couple of percentage points of your ABV, you're good. The real trick about taking readings is not to be scientifically accurate. It's to be consistent in your brewing and understand what's happening inside here, okay? I know a lot of people say, I don't care how much alcohol there is. Well, you might if when you taste it, it just tastes like honey water. It means you messed up.
Quite honestly, our goal for anything that we're brewing, the priority is flavor.
We want it to taste good. I don't really care if there's alcohol in it. If I want alcohol, I reach for one of these bottles back here. This is for flavor. Well, I mean, that's for flavor
But
too.
all the readings that we take, we know are going to help us to figure out what may or may not be going on because we have all that information at our disposal.
Another thing, you notice I stopped about there, just where the shoulder of the bottle starts to go up, leaving some headspace. It's actually got about that much headspace because this may foam up as it starts to work. If it foams up too much, we have to go to a plan B, which is a blow-off tube. I don't want to have to do that. But if it starts going up into your airlock, you got to take the airlock out, you got to clean it up and all that. So you leave a little bit of headspace just in case of that. Okay?
If you end up with an overactive fermentation that is exploding out of your airlock, we do have a video on that, and we'll share that for you.
Okay, syringe. This is a 100 ml syringe. This is a 100 milliliter graduated cylinder. So in theory, I should be able to take a 100 milliliter sample very easily and put it directly in there. I've never used this thing before. Let's see how this works. I don't actually need the full 100 ml because the hydrometer takes up some space. Can you just hold the base of that? So far, so good. There's a little bit in there. I can't waste it. All right, that can go into turbos. And now we take our hydrometer. Now a hydrometer is really just, it's kind of like a thermometer, but it measures the density of the liquid, so how much sugar is in it. And you take 2 readings in order to calculate ABV. The first is your original gravity, which is now, and then when it's done, you take another one and you subtract the difference, and that tells you how much sugar was consumed. Okay, really, really simple stuff. Let's see how good I am at estimation. Well, I said it would be 1.050, but because we're using less than a gallon, it could be a little higher. It's 1.100, which is a beautiful target number for this kind of yeast. Wonderful. Very, very happy with that. If it was too much higher than that, I might have to dilute, okay? Add a little bit more water. If it was lower than that, I could add more honey to get it to about that number. Some people will throw this away. Some people will drink this. It's sugar water. I mean, basically, honey water. I don't know why you'd want to drink it. If you really want to know what your must tastes like before you ferment it, go for it. But, I mean, just add a little honey to water and you kind of know. I'd much rather just put this right back in because, 100 milliliter, I don't know, that's like 1/7 of a bottle. Almost 1/8 of a bottle. All right, put that in there. Then we have our lid. Now, this lid has a little rubber grommet on the inside, so it makes a seal. It has a grommet up here that makes a seal with the airlock. And I'm just literally going to screw it on. At this point, I'll swirl it a little bit because mixing this is difficult. Okay, that's another reason why I like the carboys, because you put a stopper in and you can shake the bejesus out of it. There you have it. That's a must. Now, how long will this take? Mead tends to take longer than wines and ciders, okay? Honey's a little bit more of a complex thing to break down. Yeast work a little bit harder. But in reality, I probably won't touch this for a month. It'll probably be done in 2 to 3 weeks. I say 2 to 3. It could be done in 1. It could be done in 7. After a month, I'll take a look at it. Normally what I do is I don't really do this, but I tell people to do this. So I'm going to apologize right now because we usually do things on video. So taking a reading and going, not ready, doesn't make a lot of sense to us. So I overweight. I give it a lot more time so that I know it's got to be done.
And so I'm going to interrupt him right there because this reminds me of something that we get asked a lot, and that's something that we've heard people do, and they get all excited and confused. What did I
Flummoxed.
do? Racking. So racking is going to be the next step. Once this is done, we're going to rack, and what that means is we're going to remove the liquid from all the solids. So the dead yeast, which is called lees, it'll settle on the bottom, the ginger, all that stuff we're going to leave in here, and we're going to put the liquid, which is our alcoholic beverage, in a fresh, clean bottle. That process is called racking. Please do not rack right away.
Yeah.
Because if you remove all the liquid from what you're trying to work with, then it's going to stop your fermentation. And
You basically killed off your colony.
I don't know why people are so pushed to rack quickly.
I know why they are. I know why. Let me get in.
Okay.
It's because there's a lot of groups out there that are talking about mead and things like that. And there's a lot of people who, I don't know why, but they want to make it where it's hard to do. Mead was made in the home for eons, long before us, when people didn't know as much about these things as we do now. So there's absolutely no reason why the average person can't make this. I mean, if it was legal, kids could make this, But anyway, we're not getting into that. And if you're a kid watching this, get your parents something. Anyway, people do that because they're afraid, okay? They don't understand. And other people are telling them, oh, you need to rack it off the lees. Here is a truth about mead and wine and cider and beer even. You can leave it in this container as is without touching it, as long as you keep it in a relatively cool place. I'll talk about temperatures in a minute. And dark. Light will harm yeast, okay? They are photosensitive. You want it to be dark. You can leave it like this, literally, years. Years. Now, at that point, that yeast may have some effect on the flavor of the mead. What effect? Can't really say. It's an inconsistency.
Now, in this particular case, I would suggest not leaving it for years because
We have some solids in
we're working with ginger and we want to extrude the right amount of ginger flavor out, but not too much. Extract. Yes. So that is something we need to take into consideration. Also, Brian said these are solids, and anything that you introduce into a fermentation that has a solid, particularly one that's going to float, that could be a place where bacteria, unwanted bacteria, start to grow, and that's bad.
Now, you don't have to worry about it too much, okay? And this is where people get concerned. They think, oh, it's going to happen in like a day. No. For this to turn moldy, several things have to happen. First, you got to remember one thing. There's air in there right now, but air, oxygen, and all that is lighter than CO2, okay? As this starts working and producing CO2, it's going to force all that oxygen out. Now we have a non-oxygenated environment. All CO2. Mold won't grow. Cannot grow. Over time, it is possible that this isn't hermetically sealed and all that. So a little bit of air could get in there, and that could cause mold growth. When I say over time, I mean months. I don't mean a couple of weeks. If you see mold, okay, you want to clean it out. You want to get that gone. Most of the time, mold on things like this, you can use a big scoop and scoop everything out around it. Just do one big swish like that. If it doesn't taste bad, it probably didn't affect it because it'll only mold on the top. It's kind of like when you make sauerkraut. It can only hit the stuff that touches air. Nothing down here is affected as long as you don't mix it through. All right, so be careful with that. But that's an important factor to note. That blanket of CO2 protects this. And as long as you watch this airlock and you see pressure here, you know there's CO2 coming out and it's safe, okay? But you do want to rack this. I'm going to rack it after probably 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. Once it's in that secondary, I don't like to degas much. Degassing means to remove the CO2. So a lot of people will shake that up and then put it into secondary. I've actually gotten away from doing that. I like it to do that naturally, let it off gas on its own, for a couple of reasons. One is I like that blanket of CO2. Okay, that's a big one because I don't always have just the right amount of headspace and this and that. So I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves because that's the second part of this video, really.
Another reason why we like the blanket of CO2 is that it also protects your brew from turning into vinegar. Mm-hmm. Vinegar is created by acetobacters,
which are already here,
but they need the alcohol that's in your brew and the oxygen to create vinegar. So if there's no oxygen, no vinegar.
Exactly. So all those things come into play. And these are some of the little things that are important to know. But one other rule that I'm going to tell you is this. Mead wants to make itself. We just have to get the heck out of the way. Really, don't mess with it. Don't touch it. Let it go. Let it do its thing. No matter what it looks like, no matter what it's doing, don't touch this for a month. And you'll be much happier for it.
Well, not no matter what it looks like. If you see the mold, like
if it turns red or green, I'd get concerned, but it's not gonna. That's just not gonna happen.
I know, but
another thing about mead in particular is the acetobacter and vinegar thing. It's much harder to spoil mead than other types of alcohols. A lot of the sanitization craze comes from beer making. In beer making, you have sugar stuck to the walls of beer tuns and things like that, or mash tuns, I'm sorry. And all that will attract bacteria and be very susceptible to bad things. You don't have much alcohol in beer, so you can turn a beer, if you're not careful, really, really easily. Wine and cider, harder than beer, but still can be done. When it comes to mead, though, what's it made from?
Honey.
The one food that does not spoil. Now, this is diluted. It can spoil, but it is still honey. Mead is very, very hard to mess up, okay? People will have you believe that, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to, all these chemicals and this and that. You don't have to. Now, one thing I will say, there's the Tosna method. I'm not even going to get into it, but it's the scientific modern way of making mead. If you do it that way, you will probably have a drinkable mead sooner than doing it a natural method. Are they better? That's up for debate. Some people say yes, some people say no. I can tell the difference. I can taste the chemicals. I prefer not to do it. Plus, they're chemicals. We have so many chemicals in everything. Why add more? There's just no need. So I like to do
For
it this
our
way.
opinion, if you want to brew with chemicals, then just go to the store and buy mead. And
Yeah, you
there
might
you
as well
go.
just buy it because that's what you're going to get. What else? Honestly, I think that's about it. This video has run really, really long. If anybody has any more comments or questions that they want to know about specific things, ask away in the comment section. I do tend to check them nearly every day. Weekends, maybe not so much, but during the week, absolutely. I'm checking them on my phone the second the video goes up, that kind of thing. So we do respond. We actually do. If we also have a City Steading Facebook page where you can ask questions and talk, and people are starting to respond back and all that. It's actually turning into a little community. But if you like this video, give it a like. If you want to see what we're up to, hit subscribe. And if you want to help support the channel and be part of the VIP, which this gets you into our VIP club on Facebook. There's some confusion there. We have a page and then we have the VIP club. They're different things. You get into the VIP club through Patreon. There'll be a link below and probably right here where you can become a patron. You're helping out the channel and you get into that VIP club where you can ask us questions directly. We share videos, insider information, stuff like that. You tend to hear things first is the easiest way to say it. That's all I got for today. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day.
Bye bye.